I'm Jeff Crawford. I'm the director of the Bureau of Air Quality, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Transportation Work Group. I'm joined this morning by Joyce Taylor, who is our other co-chair. Before we go on, I would be remiss if I didn't give special thanks to Sierra Millay, Jen Langland, who I don't believe is here. Both worked with Joyce at DOT, and really they are the brains behind the operation, if you will. They did a lot of our writing and plan development for us. And then finally, David Plum, who did a wonderful job facilitating. He's the best. Okay, we had a very diverse group of transportation work group members, everything from town managers, industry folks, environmental folks. It was a really good group. We had a lot of lively, not heated discussions, but a lot of lively discussions on the direction the transportation work group should go and what our recommendations should look like. I'm going to go over just the first one. Now, we had three recommendations. One was to accelerate light-duty vehicle electrification. Another one was to accelerate or produce VMT reductions. And then finally, the third major recommendation was to accelerate the adoption of medium and heavy-duty vehicles. Okay, as usual, I got ahead of myself, but there they are. Okay, accelerating Maine's transition to light-duty electric vehicles, including plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. First action was to expand our electric vehicle charging stations statewide. We've already done a really good job. I'm not sure, Michael probably knows what the number this week is. I can't keep track of it. One week it's 1,200 charging stations, the next week it's 1,300, the next week 14, and so on and so on. But we're actually in a really good place for our fleet right now. I think folks have probably seen some of the media reports that we actually have more chargers per vehicle than just about any place in the country. That's great. We need more, though. If we're going to meet our electrification targets, we will need additional electric vehicle charging stations. The good news is over the next 4 years, we have identified about $52 million for public charging. There's going to be a lot more charging stations, fast chargers, level 2 chargers, and chargers in over 50 communities that are disadvantaged. Another priority would be electric vehicle education for drivers, dealers, and employers. Drivers, we constantly hear that, I don't know where to charge. I'd love to buy an EV, but there's not enough charging out there. That's a need. We need to get the word out. We need education for dealers. So a lot of dealers who are apprehensive about selling electric vehicles because they don't understand them. They don't understand the market. There are barriers, or at least perceived barriers, to their participation. And finally, education for employers. Be great if employers were providing incentives, free charging, or even just putting up charging stations at their places of work. Targets for EVs, including low and moderate income drivers. As a result of the modeling that the Climate Council is going to be doing, we're going to be developing targets for EV adoption. Support EV adoption through policy. There's a lot of policies out there for both the utility sector, from buildings and infrastructure that can help support the adoption of electric vehicles. So there are things we can do that essentially encourage the adoption of vehicles through make-ready type activities. And then finally, we would like to increase EV rebates for all drivers, particularly for low and moderate income drivers. So right now, there are a number of programs out there at the federal and state level providing EV rebates, but we need to increase those. We need to provide additional incentives for drivers to adopt the technology. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Joyce, who will be telling us about vehicle miles traveled, and medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is really a big part of what our group talked about a lot was the vehicle miles traveled. And one thing that we had a lot of conversation about was transit, and that transit needs to be easy, affordable, and fast. We had, I think Jean is here, she told a story about trying to go from South Portland to Portland, and I think it took her 2 hours on transit. So obviously that's not a mode of choice for many people. When it's not convenient. Again, we talked about education and awareness about things like riding a bike and walking and the benefits of it and how to do it safely, as well as riding transit and what that looks like in Maine. The goals for more buses, bikes, and carpooling. I'm not sure that we had the Go Maine carpool on this event, but just trying to get people on something like this carpool, try to take advantage of that, and biking, and also more routes, more flexibility in terms of being able to get a bus, and that there's just more availability in terms of you being able to pick a ride that meets your time frame. And invest in low carbon transportation when expanding roads. So one of the things we talked about that's in the weeds is if there is new capacity transportation in Maine, new roads, that we would look at mitigating with low carbon methods or low carbon modes. And that was a commitment that Maine DOT and the Turnpike said that they were willing to make. So that was one of the things that we put in as a recommendation. Help people try and buy e-bikes. This is especially helpful with an equity background. I can tell you that Maine DOT and Department of Labor have been sponsoring a very small pilot project with e-bikes to get people in recovery back to work. It's been phenomenally successful to date. Really interesting how that's working out. Study the emissions impacts of buses and bikes. One of the things, a lot of the data is really old, like at least 10 years old. There's a lot of the studies are sort of speculation about how much active biking and walking would really save you from a greenhouse gas reduction point of view. And so we were saying, we really don't have the data to make informed decisions, and we need to try to figure out like what that data looks like, because you've got some studies that say it makes a big difference. You have other studies that said it makes no difference. And so you're trying to figure out like what is the answer there. Expand the Go Maine carpool program, have intercity and rural van bus pilots. Like we're very open to like, let's try some things. Let's try to see if people will ride a van together. Let's try to see if people, will use this to go to work. And what if we use electric vans because we might be actually putting more vehicle miles on the road if we're getting more people to where they need to be. And then make roads safer for biking and walking. I think this also gets at housing and land use, because honestly, if you can get people to want to live in that community, that village, it's just, I think we could all say that it's more economically vibrant when people are able to walk and bike in their village and feel like they can get around and it's safe. And what I can tell you at DOT, being chief engineer, is what people say to me is, I don't feel safe. I don't want to walk. I don't want to ride a bike with my family if I don't feel safe. So safety is really paramount. And I think the other thing in terms of reducing vehicle miles traveled, there's so much synergy with health benefits, economic vibrance. I mean, there's lots of good reasons to do this other than reduction of carbon emissions. So one thing that we also talked, and not as much about zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicles. We talked about expanding the electric and hybrid buses and ferries. The Maine State Ferry Service has a plan that they're working on right now. And again, pilot electric trucks and buses to show how they work. There's a lot of skepticism in the state about northern climates and range and power availability. And so let's just try to get some out here and see if they'll work. And then I think this is a really key one, develop fleet electrification advisory services. Help, I've personally talked to a company that wants to go electric. They have a business model to make it happen. They've really, really struggled to get information to be able to do it. It's been really difficult to figure out who to go to. And so I think this is a really big key. You know, those people who want to do it, give them some technical assistance, and then some more incentives for vans, trucks, and buses. We actually, my bad, Molly, I should have corrected this, but it actually talked about rather than implement the clean transportation roadmap, because we haven't seen it yet, we haven't seen the recommendations, was to build upon those recommendations. And so that was a big discussion we had at the group. So I want to clarify that for my friends on the working group. And then we had some interesting comments from the priority population. I think housing came up, and in particular, it's kind of like, you know, I don't know why I want to talk about EV charging stations when I don't have housing. Like, that's important to me. And so that was sort of one of the themes I think the Mitchell Center picked up on, that people can't see themselves in an EV in moderate low income when they're trying to figure out their housing crisis. Again, this is a big issue in Maine. I think we saw this I think the pandemic really shined a light on how people were really isolated if they couldn't get a ride from somebody. But people don't have cars. A lot of people in Maine don't have cars or a reliable car, and they don't have a way to get to the doctor, to get food, to get their kids to events, to do things that I think a lot of us take for granted. And so that was something about, from an equity standpoint, some of these recommendations, especially in VMT, really get at equity issues as well. And then I think some other things, there was actually a really good news story about Washington County a couple months ago, and the problems with transportation security and people not having rides, as well as, we had some expanded public transportation. People are looking for some way to get to where they need to go. And so this is an opportunity also to electrify buses. We have some electric buses in the state that are working well. If we all remember that horrible day, what was it, a year ago, when it was like 40 below zero or something, the buses were working, the electric buses in Portland, so they did work. And then availability, schedule, location, and ease in terms of public transportation. We heard that over and over again, like I have to wait so long to get a ride, then I have to wait so long to get another ride home. And then the focus groups that the Mitchell Center had were not aware of Go Maine as a carpooling service, but they were excited to hear about it. So there's some work for Maine DOT to do to promote that program. And then there were just concerns, and this, I think there's a lot of, I know I get asked all the time about mining and battery disposal, the cost of them. Also, fire keeps coming up. That's a new hot topic, fire with EVs. So a lot of things. But I think some of the things that we talked about is, the transit really came up. Especially the public EV charging. We have a lot of it in the state. We can do more. We can make people feel more comfortable from a range anxiety point of view. Car share programs was one of the things that came up. We talked about, one of our members works with an elderly population, and she had some ideas. And then EV cost and charging availability. So that was really, we put a lot of stuff in. I think we met our 10 minutes. We were the bad ones last time, so we were like the ones who got told, do not go over 10 minutes. So it was a lot of work, but we appreciate David's help, and thank you for all the working group members who are out there.
Absolutely.